cope. Good. So, hello everybody. This is to welcome you all to the. This is the fourth of the Feminist Library webinars in our series about working on care and building a feminist world and working our way out of crisis. Our previous webinars have been about care workers, the effect of COVID-19 on women's roles and reproductive rights. And the videos are all available on our website, and our website, our web address will come up in the chat box at various points. So do have a look there. So before we move into the more interesting stuff, I'm just going to explain the practicalities of how the Zoom webinar is going to work. And this is, as I was saying to those of you who were here a few minutes ago, this is the first time we've used it in this format. So it's yet another learning experience for us all. We decided to do it like this because we wanted to protect ourselves from Zoom bombing. We did have a Zoom bombing incident in one of our webinars, and it just seemed, although this is less friendly than having everybody on the screen, we felt it just kind of protected us all better. But we might well be able to turn everybody's sound on towards the end of the meeting. Helpful. Okay, so we've got several members of the Feminist Library tech team to help tonight, and they all have Feminist Library after their name. Now, can I just ask you, Emma, who's our chief technical person, is everybody else, as well as the panelists, are they all visible to everybody else? Or is it just the panelists, literally the panelists?
The people who are here from the Feminist Library are visible unless they want to turn their video off.
Okay, that's
so
cool.
It's up to them.
So you can see who they are, and they've got Feminist Library after their name. And if you want to message them privately, if you've got any technical issues, then do go ahead and do that. And thanks everybody. This is good. And so my name's Gail, and I'm the facilitator for tonight. I won't be able to keep my eye on the chat box, so don't ask me anything. But we want you to ask lots of questions to our speakers. And what again, this is the first time we've got this facility. We've got the Q&A facility. So if you want to ask a question, it would be really helpful if you could put it in the Q&A and then just use the chat for any other kinds of, you know, comment, general chat, any links to organisations, that kind of thing. Yes, publications, that sort of thing. Okay, so the meeting officially ends at 8:30. And of course you are free to go after that, or you're free to go before that if you find it really boring. But after the official meeting ends, then we hope we'll at least be able to open the sound up for everybody, even though we won't be able to have your pictures available. And just to say, I know most of you will probably have given a donation to attend today, but the Feminist Library, like everybody else, is a bit strapped for cash. So if you feel able to make a donation or join as a friend, we'd really appreciate that. Okay, so now to the business of the actual why we're all here. And so I just want to welcome you all again to our webinar of housing as a feminist issue. And I suppose the question really is how we take the anger with our government, which has only been made worse, COVID-19, and you know, so many other things have been happening. On the positive side, you know, that Black Lives Matter has become much to our attention, and so how can we turn all of these things that are happening in this difficult time, you know, into effective action, you know, for ourselves and for all women? Because one of the reasons why we decided we wanted to do these webinars is because we do feel that so much of women's particular problems and their caring roles and so on is hidden and is unrecognised. And we don't want to follow the media agenda, but we want to create our own. A rhetorical question: has the pandemic finished? No, it hasn't. So we don't think we can move on. We don't want to leave anybody behind. So I'm just, there's some really obvious things about why, you know, why housing is a feminist issue. And these are going to be elaborated on by, you know, by the speakers when they talk to us. But just to raise a couple of the most, you know, pressing things, that domestic abuse is a primary cause of leading to homelessness. And women are more likely to be amongst the hidden homeless. This is, they often, you know, they live on other people's floors and so on. And of the nearly 80,000 households in England that are living in temporary accommodation at present, 45% of these are lone mothers with dependent children. So, as I said, and each of our lovely speakers are going to tell us about the particular situation of themselves and their organisations. And we're very, very pleased that, you know, they're all kind of grassroots activists who are joining us tonight as well. So let's move straight along. And first of all, I'm going to welcome Gazal Haqqani, who's from London Renters Union. So Gazal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you everyone for having me here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I'm quite nervous. I'm not used to this at all. So many people listening to me. So I hope, yes, please bear with me when I stumble. My name is Gazal, and I am here to represent London Renters Union. Now, housing is without a doubt a feminist issue, and as Gail spoke about the statistics, it's quite evident. Now, we live in a deeply unequal and patriarchal society, and it is true globally in varying degrees, and it manifests in different cultures in different ways. When I spoke to, when Gail talked to me about this and gave me this opportunity, I sort of, you know, the thing that came to my mind first was how it has affected me in my childhood. And I grew up in India, which is of course very different to the UK, but London is not very different from Bombay or Mumbai, how it is called now. I think if you had to compare Bombay to London and the housing system, it is, if the welfare system was completely to be cancelled, then London would look very much like Bombay, which is a complete chaos in terms of housing. So there are only a huge number of people live. So 50% of the people live on 10% of the land, and the rest is owned. So there's a huge inequality in resources, and yes, so it's quite horrible. But the way it's personally affected me when I was growing up was because my mom separated from my father when I was a teenager, and 3 of my siblings were quite young, but it was impossible for my mother to have gained custody for any of us, essentially because she had no means of safe and secure housing. Even in the middle class metropolitan city scenario in India, when I was growing, it was quite a stigma for a woman to be initiating divorce and living alone, and then the emotional trauma of being separated from her children. I moved to London 14 years ago, and it was quite shocking to find that domestic violence is still, the victims have to live with the abusive partners, and the statistics of the number of women dying at the hands of or being killed by abusive partners was horrendous. I would never have imagined that a place like UK, or an advanced sort of economically quite rich place, would still leave out women, and this runs across the economic spectrum, I think, leave out women in such a way. So the way women are marginalized here is quite shocking. And the issue of housing continues to sort of haunt me now here in a different way. It's affected the way it's affected me and my family. So I live in Newham. And it is one of the places which has been disproportionately hit by COVID. It has the highest death rate in the UK, but there is a context to it. 70% of the income, of most Londoners, but I suspect it is far more in Newham, goes in the rent. It also has a very high number of. It also has a very high number of the highest household debt in the country, and so when I moved here, being a migrant woman just compounded the issues, and you're left with. So I was left with no safety net. For instance, we have to pay the Home Office around £8,000 every 2.5 years, and not a lot of people know about this. It's called no recourse to public funds. When Stephen Timms, our MP, questioned the Prime Minister about this, he seemed to not even know what no recourse to public funds was. So, which actually means that no matter how difficult your situation is, you will not get anything in terms of help towards your housing or anything if you, on your card, on your biometric card, it says no recourse to public funds. And it doesn't matter how much money have you put in the system in terms of taxes. And so this was a reality that we had to grapple with. Along with this was the rent that just increased every time. And then comes in London Renters Union. So London Renters Union was the place that I found which resonated with my politics, with the solidarity that it has with renters. It just seemed like the place where I could actually organize and find people who were going through similar situation, and where we could sort of organize and actually have a voice. So yes, it's been a huge help. It's been a home in a way, where I have sort of found a safe place to find to you know, for how can I put it, which gave me that moral strength. And in this situation during the COVID, during the pandemic, the housing inequality has really come out in the open. And it's, I mean, the 24th August is the time when the eviction ban comes to an end. And a lot of families like mine are at the risk of eviction. It's not, you know, been covered as much in the media at all. And there could be many reasons for it. Perhaps the journalists don't really understand that, you know, what you cannot recognize, what you don't go through, you can't recognize and you don't see as a problem. So it's really important for us to have this connection with people and speak directly to them, people like you. And we'd like...
Oh, frozen. Okay, so Gazal seems to have frozen. Can we easily unfreeze her, do we think? Okay, well, I think she was just coming to the end anyway, and she was going to say a bit about London Renters Union. So I think what we'll do is, I don't know if you can hear me, Gazal, but I think we'll move on at this point, and then we'll come back and ask Gazal to say a bit more about London Renters Union later on, because there are some interesting things to say about that. Okay, oh my goodness, she's disappeared. Okay, cool. All right, so yes, thank you very much to her, and we'll look forward to welcoming her back. So I guess then, shall we? We've got Mandy, you're all right. Yeah, you haven't frozen. Okay, so all right, next time I'm going to introduce you all to Mandy Ogunmowken, and she's the founder and chief brains behind the Treasures Foundation. Okay, there's a funny noise. Sorry, just 1 second, Mandy. Okay, Gazal, we're going to come back to you later.
Sorry, I'm really sorry about it. Yes.
Gazal, can you mute yourself, and then we'll come back to you? Okay, I think that's all right. Okay, so Mandy. Yeah, I was just saying that I'll leave you, Mandy, to just introduce yourself and what you do with your project. So welcome to you.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Mandy Ogunmowken, and I'm the founder of Treasures Foundation. And Treasures came about reflecting on my own life. I was a heroin, crack addict, thief and a prostitute, and I've come from 2 generations of that. So my mother and grandmother were prostitutes, and it's kind of like my lifestyle was in and out of Holloway prison over the 20 years that I was hooked onto heroin. And to be fair, if you know, in reality, my mum had the inability to teach us how to live, because she wasn't taught how to live as a productive member of society. So we just like replicated what had been going on for generations. And it wasn't until I got into recovery, and it was when I got my first job. I ended up working back in Holloway prison. That was my first ever paid job, and it was it was there that I started to get my voice, because I felt like I felt silenced. Because the inner trauma, I was sexually abused as a child, and for some reason, when you're born into trauma, you get an invisible plaster stuck over your mouth, and it's like, don't talk. Well, it was when I started working in Holloway, I always found, looking at myself, I always found myself inadequate, but other people could see in me something that I couldn't see myself, and they could see good in me. And anyway, so working in the prison, what I noticed was that women were getting released, and it's sad, because like when I was in prison, Holloway was like my home, and I mean, that's just saying what my life was like out there on the streets, to have a prison as your second home, and to feel relieved to go into prison for a break. I find that very sad, and that's because in society, women that are coming from lifestyles like myself are not understood. People don't understand, and I think it's because they don't listen. The society sometimes thinks that they've got the answers, that they believe they know how it should go for us, and it's not true. So working in Holloway, it used to be fair, when I used to see women come back, you know, it'd be a relief that they were still alive, because like women were getting released to know where to live. I can remember going to work one day, and I see a lady on a bench asleep, and she'd been one of my clients in Holloway, and I wanted to go and wake her up and say hello and stuff, but then I realized if I woke her up, that's when a nightmare begins. Because like when you're asleep you can dream, but then when you're awake you're living in a very real nightmare, and it's absolutely petrifying. So whilst in Holloway, I just thought there's got to be more than this, and I know there is supported houses, I know there is, but to be fair, a lot of the supported houses are just that in name. They don't actually meet the needs of the women at all. And I think I'm not saying they're all like that, but a lot of them are like that, and it's just supported housing just in name only. So my heart was, I've got to do something, and I was quite fortunate. A friend of mine just gave me 3 houses to work with, and I started to get women, not just women from prison, vulnerable women that wanted a new way of life, that wanted to have that space to be able to be empowered and to be free, to allow their trauma to come out. I mean, like in these houses, right, I've had women in there that maybe didn't get undressed to go to bed for a whole year. That's because they're afraid of their abuser. Now, out on the streets, you wouldn't see that. So anybody that's coming from that trauma, you think, oh, just give them this and they'll be all right, and but you don't see what's hidden behind the masks. But in a loving, supporting environment, and when I say the houses are homes. They're homes, and they're small houses so that nobody doesn't go missing. You know, we had ladies in there that couldn't even get in the shower if other people was in the house, because they were so afraid of the trauma. And we mark success when girls can get undressed, put their nighties on, put their slippers on. To us, that is a success. So during the COVID, in a sense, obviously it's devastating, but we drew a lot of good out of it, because a lot of the women's devices were taken away where they had to be still. So we was able to see the trauma come out much more. It was more intensified. And so we was able to get specialized therapy for our women. And that's where we function differently. When we see a need, we will go all out to pull in the finances to meet the needs of the women. So we've got we've got women that have been through the houses that get paid work. They're getting paid to work within the houses, and women that get restored back to their children. You're talking about when a woman's life change around, when a woman feels safe and free to talk about what's going on the inside, and feels safe enough to let down her masks. You're talking about that woman, the ripple effect on that is generations, is their children, you know. So yes, women are important, and women need to be heard. We've got a lot of hidden stuff, and we need to feel safe. So anyway, so Treasures, we're based in Newham, and so what we found that when the women had finished doing, I mean, and also we haven't got a time on our houses, because there isn't a set time when a woman can be well. To me, you know, it makes me laugh when the system says, oh, we'll give you 3 months and then you're meant to be all right. I mean, serious? But we haven't got a time limit, so women leave when at the right time. But what we find is like when they go onto the council, and where the council, where they want to put them, it's devastating. They want to just put them back into a dark place amongst active drug users, active crime within properties that are crime ridden. So we fight against that, and what's happening at the minute, you know, I refuse it. Our women deserve something better. But what's happened at the minute? At the minute, we've been gifted 8 container flats, and they've all been kitted out, beautiful to high standard. And at the minute, we're asking Newham to give us some land so that we can put these properties on, to enable our women to move on. And then we've got somebody else that has bought us 4 one-bedroom flats that are being built for the women. I think it's just sad when you've got so much hope, and it can take a system to crush it. But to be fair, I believe that we can rise above it. I just won't accept it. I'm not accepting that. If they say no, I just say we can, and my faith in that so far, like I said, we've been gifting these container flats, and we're having 4 one-bedroom flats built. So I believe that that women's voices are strong, and I believe that we are strong. I believe that we are powerful, and I believe that when we don't settle for anything less, I really believe that our needs will be met, and that's just something that's in me. I don't believe that a woman coming from trauma and gets into recovery and does so much work on herself, and then for it to be dashed into a dark place, I won't accept that. So all I know is that the women in Treasures, they're strong women, and when we find our voice, we have got a voice, and united, we won't move. I don't really know what else to talk about, but I'm very passionate about what I do. I believe in what I do, and I think, you know, I think like united in what's going on now, in what we do, eventually something has to give, and I'm not going anywhere, so I'll just leave it there.
Okay, so Mandy, actually, I'd just like to say that because I saw a previous presentation that Mandy did, and she gave us a Zoom tour of these houses, and it was completely fantastic that, you know, Mandy's the work that she has achieved just from her own initiative of building up these houses, you know, from scratch, I think is really, you know, is really important. And I think why, you know, I don't think, I know that why we wanted you on this panel was because, you know, of the inspiration that you provide for women, you know, who society has rejected, and is particularly hard, as we know, for women, you know, women ex-prisoners. They've got the extra stigma on them of being women and trying to struggle with all of that stuff in this society. And that the fact that you don't put any time limit, and that you support them, and that you give them, you organise therapy. And do I remember correctly that they were actually doing the gardening? Maybe I just dreamt that.
And that is what's beautiful within us, right? I mean, like, we've got gifts, we've got treasures, and given that time, these treasures and gifts get unleashed. They come out. I mean, like, one of our ladies, she's actually running an art class within the houses, and then we've got another lady doing a meditation class. They've got a wealth of treasure within them, just bursting to come out, and we have the right for that to come out.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you're getting lots of congratulations in the chat box, Mandy, which you richly deserve. But does anybody have any specific questions? I mean, I know Mandy could say a little bit more about the you know, the fundraising, because that is really important, isn't it? That you you know, you've managed to do amazing work on very little money. But we'll put up in the chat box if anybody would like to donate, and have a look on your website. You can get more information about this. Yeah.
Yeah, and when it comes to fundraising, because I'm very mindful about charities, it's so important that the vision that you have for your charity, that the people can't get lost, because you can get caught up in all the admin and the wages and all that, and I'd rather, you know, if it means that the needs of the women are not getting met, it doesn't mean nothing. It really doesn't.
Okay, and here we've got a very interesting question for you from Kate John. She says, or she asks, do you see a way that your model of working could work in larger settings such as hostels?
Yeah, we are working with somebody for that to happen. Most definitely needs to happen it needs, and I'm not saying everywhere, some places do what we do, but it most definitely needs, because like, it's like a hurting child that's trapped in an adult's body, you know, and you know, in hostels you can people can be judged just on their appearance and how they're acting, but half the time it's just crying out for help.
Yeah.
A cry for help. Most definitely.
Yes, and so
work is the most important.
So even though you've done it primarily from, you know, your settings are quite small, but you think they could be, you know, scaled up into larger places if there was.
Yeah, I don't really agree with large institutions.
No.
I think for me, right, when I was in and out of prison, in and out of children's home, I could work with that. But what I couldn't work with was a loving home, because I wasn't used to that. I wasn't used to the normality of a loving home. So I think it's about teaching people how to live in a loving home. In a big hostel, it's just like being in a prison.
Yeah.
You know, and so many people get missed. In a smaller environment, people are not going to get missed, because they're going to be noticed when they're not there.
Right.
You know.
Okay. No, that's really interesting. Okay. Well, I think we should move on then for now.
you.
And if you want to stay, of course, you're more than welcome, but
I'm going to have to go, sorry.
you have to go. I mean, thank you very much. And loads of people have been saying how much they appreciate what you've been saying. So thanks a lot, Mandy, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay. Good. So now, yes, and just a general reminder to everybody. Okay, I think, yes, I'm going to leave the questions that I had for Gazal to the end, just to ask you or encourage you all to put questions into the chat, no, not into the chat box, into the Q&A to make our life easier. Okay, who have we got next? Remind me. Oh, we've got Lucia next, yes. So, I'm going to welcome Lucia Fitzgerald. This is one of the good things about Zoom, is that she's able to join us from Manchester. She's going to tell you basically about herself, but she's been an activist in LGBT work and the women's liberation movement since she arrived as a homeless young woman on the streets in Manchester back in the 70s. And she's still active. So welcome, Lucia. And so, yes, so I'm going to ask you a few questions. So would you like to say a bit more about how you came to be involved in politics?
Well, I got involved in politics through the LGBT plus movement, and there was a big conference, women's conference in Manchester, and I decided I'd go along to that. And I have hardly any education at all. My vocabulary even now is very narrow because I've had no schooling. So I've been living on my wits basically all my life. And I can understand what Mandy was saying about you take what happened to you when you were young into your adulthood, and the child is still there, believe it or not. That really hit home to me because I ran away. And we all know children don't run away for nothing, may I add. And they shouldn't be judged, they should be helped. The question was, how did I politicize myself? I used the women's movement as a vehicle, if you like, to advance my education, because I knew I had absolutely nothing between the ears. But what I did have was this the survival instinct that I never knew that I had on the streets. And I knew that I had a lot of respect for myself, even though a lot of people, when I was living at home, had very little respect for me. And so for the first time in my life, I could actually breathe. I could breathe. And I was starting to, as I spoke to a lot of people, I thought, it's not just me. There's millions of people like me out there. There's millions of disadvantaged people out there. So I thought I'll join the women's movement and try and educate myself there. But of course, when I went to the conference, I couldn't understand a word that was being said on the podium because the language was totally alien to me. And that wasn't their fault. It was just alien to me, being uneducated and at a total disadvantage. And so I decided, but what they were saying, I thought was really interesting. So that's how I educated myself, through the women's movement itself. Now in Manchester, they were talking about actually getting a women's centre together. So I thought maybe I should volunteer for that. So I did. I went in there and I met loads of women from different backgrounds, and I learned loads of stuff. And as I was advancing up here, you know, I started just being the person that I was always meant to be now. And I knew myself, to get anywhere, you have to have some sort of knowledge about whatever, and politics. And every time people mention, I didn't even know what a bloody MP was. I had no idea what the word politics meant. Now that's how bad it was. But as I learned more, I thought to myself, surely to goodness, there must be a way of changing all these types of things. So we set up a phone line, and the next minute the phone's ringing off the hook with from women of all backgrounds wanting help with shelter for them and their children, walking the streets at night, women being beaten, abused, you name it. It was terrible. And so our house, the women's centre, started filling up with women and children. So we'd no place to put them. And so people was talking about squatting and stuff like that back in those days. So I said, well, I'm quite happy to bust in any door. We can't have these children and women walking the streets anymore in the night. They were sleeping in the bath on the bloody land and everywhere. And we had a big pot in the kitchen, and it was always constantly full of stew. And to feed people, because they'd no money, they came in the clothes they were stood up with. The police started bringing them to the door. So we kicked in the door of a refuge, and we went in there and we squatted. We asked the powers that be at the time if they'd give us some sort of a grant, or if they would want to take it over and run it. You know, the councils and things, they were having none of it. So what we did was we went ahead and rang up the BBC and Grenada, which is our local TV stations. Up they came, and we told them that we had a load of people there. They wouldn't put the cameras on the door. We said, and we have women here, and nobody is allowed to help them. Nobody wants to hear about battered women or any of the rest of it. They weren't interested. So what we did then was that went out, of course, and the next minute we got people coming to the door, shoving checks through the door. We didn't even have a bloody bank account, and leaving food and stuff on the steps. And it went on and on from there until eventually we created the Second Women's Aid. We hadn't heard of Erin Pitsey where we were at. We didn't know anything about Erin Pitsey at the time, but we heard later that this woman called Erin Pitsey had started this thing in London. We thought we were the first. And anyways, we filled up the house with women, and the next minute people were getting in touch saying, yes, we can give you grants all of a sudden after the publicity, of course, etc., etc. And so in the meantime, I'd educated myself that much. I thought women really have to have the means of their own production. We have to be, you know, if we don't do that, we can be disadvantaged. This was all the things I learned. So I got myself a job after we handed over to the women that got grants to run the place. I got myself a job in a printer's because I wanted some sort of a trade to be able to keep myself. But then I thought to myself, let's wait and see what comes from this, because every advantage that comes your way, there'll be something for it for you where you can advance the cause, because now it's getting really political and starting to really rock and roll around the place, and felt very disadvantaged. And I felt resentful that women like me were put into these places, no skills, no nothing, etc., etc. So anyways, I was a very angry young woman at the time when I looked around and saw society as it was. I didn't realize society was that bad and that we could actually change it. I know I'm rambling now, but that's what I do.
No,
and
well.
Sorry?
I say you're doing really well. And I think that the lessons you're giving us about solidarity and making our own way is like incredibly important.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you, but I think everyone would find this very interesting as well, that aside from all your political activism, you were actually in the Northern Women's Liberation rock band. Is that not right?
Well, I was in everything. Do you know, as a kid, I never had any sort of an opportunity, shall we say. So every opportunity that came my way, I jumped into it. So here's what we did. We started the first women's printers in Manchester, so that women could have the means of production, and we could train women to get into the Women's Printings Union, because we were called machine minders, so we got half the wages that men got. And I was the first woman to take on the unions and say, give me my NGN card, and then I'll fight you on the front about equality within the print union. So they gave it to me in the end. Oh, I've had some wicked fights down the years with different people. You wouldn't believe it. And we started the second women's printing press in Manchester, which gave people the means of production, because there was a lot of groups that couldn't get their printing or anything printed anywhere because of who they were. We had a very big black movement here in Moss Side in Manchester. That's where I lived at the time. And they had nowhere to go and get printing or anything else like that done. Nobody would touch them. So I thought to myself, and it was the same for the LGBT community and women. We couldn't get anything printed. So we thought, okay, I went in, got myself, and I started an all women's press. And I told all the groups around the place, it doesn't matter whether you have money or not, come in here when you get your printing done, and there'll be no discrimination. So, and that lasted for 17 solid years until everybody became financially independent in their groups and got their own little printing presses started off. So well, you wouldn't believe it. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, I mean, this is another connection to the Feminist Library, is that we have got a lot of publications in the Feminist Library which say printed by, you were called Amazon and you were called something else, weren't you? Manchester Women's Printers or something. And we've got loads of stuff there. And there were 3 or 4 women's printers in the end, as well as all the community printers. And we, once we reopen, you can all come down and enjoy the fruits of Lucia's labour. But actually what I wanted you just to get onto, because I know that one of the things you've been really involved in the last few years is being involved in housing issues. So could you talk a bit about the housing issues that you've been involved in more recently?
Yeah, well, obviously I live in social housing, and I thought that it was very lacking in diversity and inclusion, apart from the services and all the things that we all whinge about. I thought, if I can get inside there and talk to somebody in there, yeah, we'll see what happens. But something happened. We got a new CEO, so I thought I'll go ahead and have a word with this new CEO, because I didn't really know the one before. So in I went, and the new CEO came out, and it was a woman. So I says to her, oh, so I says, I'd like to talk to you about A, B, and C regarding housing. And one of them was inclusion, diversity, and equality, right across the board, and how we could become a more tenant-led type of housing association. And so I decided to join one of the groups, which was a scrutiny group. And I'm still in the scrutiny group, pushing and pushing and pushing, but I've had loads of advantages there. Lots of them. I've ended up on the board, basically. I don't know what I'm doing on the board, but I ended up there. Because what we're doing, we're working on all sorts of grievances now, along with other tenants, about what demands that we want. And this will be the last thing I'll do. I'll stay there until we get more rights for tenants within housing associations, and until we need to hear tenants' voices, and they need to be respected, because we have to get that advance going. For the simple reason is this: the government is trying to get rid of social housing altogether. They want to privatize housing, and if that happens, it's going to be a hell of a disaster in this country, especially for ordinary working people. It really is, you know, lower paid working people, because they're given money now right, left and center for what they describe as affordable housing. Well, it wouldn't be affordable to me, and I'll never be able to get into so-called affordable housing. So I asked the question, are they funding social housing for people like myself and people that might have no wage or a very low wage, and talking about and bringing up the fact that women are at a terrible disadvantage, especially women with kids?
Yeah, yes.
You see? Nothing from them. So I've been hounding all these MPs and everything else, and croaking about it. Those that know me on Twitter, I never shut up about the government and what they're doing, you know, and I never will. Right. And until we get housing associations to find a way of turning this around with the National Housing Federation or someone's going to have to do something, because we are going to end up private. And if we're not going to end up private housing associations, we're going to end up with what, I ask you? being controlled through other ways, using the National Housing Federation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. You know what would be good actually, later on when you finished, you could put, if you could put your Twitter handle into the chat box, and then everybody can follow you. So that's another way of helping.
I'm afraid to move.
No, don't do it now. Well, we'll add it in later then.
Yeah.
Just if somebody from the team can make a note, that we'll get hold of your Twitter account.
Yeah.
That I just wanted to follow up what you were saying about the social housing, because I think one of the things that where it does, you're right, it's, you know, low income families and so on, but where it particularly impacts on women is, first of all, because, you know, as you mentioned about, you know, single mothers and single parents disproportionately having to be in social housing, but also the public service workers, like particularly in health and in education, they are the people who live in social housing, and they are disproportionately women. So this is another way that women, you know, just get kind of, what the word, you know, slammed from all directions, really, in the housing system.
Well, it's a class issue, isn't it? Let's put it right.
Yeah.
It's a class issue. Within housing as well, as you go up through the ranks, everything you see is based on capitalism. So what do we all expect here? Do you know what I mean? When everything is based on capitalism, what the hell do we all expect? It's also race hate, and it's hate everywhere you go. Yeah. Everywhere you go. And they're all trying to slam us down now and shut us up. Yes. Because we're starting to become a bit of a nuisance. But I say keep on being a nuisance. Yes. And keep on flagging the bugger up everywhere you go. Do you know what I mean? Because that's the only way you get your voice heard. Right. Well, and that is the truth, you know. Yeah, that's why. I mean, at my age, who wants to be sitting around on their arse, you know what I mean, as a volunteer in the housing association, unless you got something up your sleeve. The thing that I have up my sleeve is tenants' voices. We all need a voice at the table. If we don't get into the place that can make the changes, we're stumped. We've had it. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, you know, you're definitely a good model. I mean, and we're organising these webinars because we want to encourage people to get into more, you know, action, and not sit around on their bums. And yeah, I mean, and I was going to, I don't know, maybe actually just before we move on to Rose, who's definitely taking action and can tell us about that as well. If you're still here, Gazal, I'm not quite sure, because she was having what's the sound like?
I think the sound is okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. I was just wondering, because I think you were just about to say a bit about the role of London Renters Union, and that connects really well with Lucia's talk, because London Renters Union concentrates mostly on private tenants who are squeezed because there's no social housing. So could you just say a little bit about what you do as London Renters Union?
Yes, very quickly. I'm just going to. So it's not just private renters, but because there is there is very less social housing, but within the council housing there are lots of problems, and we have many of our members who are tenants of council houses as well, and we organize and support them. And one of the things that we do, especially now, because a lot of renters are being evicted illegally, we train around around rights, because a lot of people don't know what their rights are. You can't just, you know, the landlord can't just come and tell you that he wants to evict you, and you don't have to listen to that person. You don't have to listen to the landlord and just do what he says. You can resist, and we also have active, like we have members, or all of us show solidarity with each other. Whenever any such thing comes up, we go there and actually put our bodies there and resist evictions as well. And we have had successes. So yes, I mean, it was really interesting what Lucia was saying. It is the capitalist system, and unless you make these structural changes, you can't really get anywhere.
Mm.
Yes, and that has to come from the top. It's in housing, everything comes from the top down. So if you've
but
got
also,
if you get a good CEO in housing, it's an advantage for you.
Mm.
but also, if I could just quickly add that we are a grassroots organization, and a lot of what we are doing is mobilizing people, mobilizing tenants, and getting everyone involved, even those who are, who feel that they are okay. But if you see, that your friends, your children will be impacted by this, then you have to join in. And if you don't mind, I would just quickly add a link of London Renters Union in the chat as well, so people can have a look
Yeah,
of who we are.
yeah, we have got that, so we'll ask. I mean, Min is putting things in the chat. I don't know if you've got it back together again yet, have you? Yeah, so you could stick that into the chat again. I would, yes, I would really support, I think it is, I mean, I think we, essentially what we have to do, especially, working with women, we have to work from both ends. We have to kind of get in at the top where we can and influence those chief executives. And
yes,
this is the thing, is that it's, I mean, housing is also an area where a lot of women, are employed, and particularly in kind of senior positions. And I know that there has been some organisation of those women who work in housing associations to organise themselves, but they are not, in my experience really, they're not going to move without having the pressure from the grassroots. So, and for women, housing is home, and women are supposed to look after the home, and this is why it is such an important feminist issue, I think. Okay, so I think we should move on at this point to Rose Lewis, because much of what we're saying relates to your experience, doesn't it? So I'll just introduce you briefly and then you can fill in. So Rose Lewis is, she's, now, do you actually work at Sistah Space? Because I wasn't quite sure what those initials stood for. ID something or other. But anyway, you're part of, you're very much part of Sistah Space, which she's going to explain. And I'll just say quickly before I hand over to you that another connection between us is that she runs a bookstall in Hackney. And so there she was sitting selling books, and me being a bit of a book fanatic, I went and introduced myself to her a while back. So that was another nice connection. Okay, over to you, Rose.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Rose. I am acting CEO of Sistah Space at the moment. I'm an excuse me, an IDVA, is an independent domestic violence advisor also, and yeah, I sell books as well. Sistah Space is a charity organization, grassroots charity organization that we work with African heritage women and girls That's our specialism. We started from scratch, and we've been going for about 6 years now. Yeah, properly, you know, with all the charity status, etc., etc. Today, I actually want to talk about the experiences of some of the women that we are working with currently when it comes to housing. So this is just the observations. This is all what we've experienced, what the women have experienced as African heritage women. A lot of people call them Black women. Luchia and is it Mandy?
Yeah, Mandy. Who left?
Yeah, a lot of what you all have mentioned is some of the experiences that the women that we work with go through as well. I just want to say the connection there is really strong. As you saw me, I was just nodding and everything. But just to say, first and foremost, when it comes to housing, there are so many stereotypes and barriers for African heritage women. So sometimes even before they go in, when you go, the workers from reception right up to the top, they've already got their biases and their stereotypes. Those of us who are a little bit more mature, in the 1970s and in the 1980s, we were told, oh, you single, you Black women, single parents, you just want housing, you just want a flat, you got pregnant to get a flat, etc., etc. And a lot of the women we work with have more than 2 children. Some of them have got 6 children, between 4 to 6 children, and they will go there and, you know, just the things that some of the workers say and etc. is just absolutely horrendous. So first of all, it's the stereotypes, the biases. We all know about the racism. You know, sometimes they don't know that we are the support workers, and some of the things that they say to the women until we open our mouths is absolutely horrendous. So the women have to, before they can even talk about housing or even get to tell their story, that barrier is just there, clear and in your face. With some of the women now, they're just passed around from housing, from each borough to the other. Nobody wants to take responsibility. You lived here, so it's not our job. It is this borough's job. We didn't receive the information that we need. You know, we can't proceed because we don't have this statement and that report and all this kind of thing. And we find a lot of our time is spent making phone calls, writing letters, till eventually you have to really just go to the top, right to the top. Nowadays, we don't even play around anymore, speaking to this person, that person, because this person hasn't written a report. And some of the situations are dire, you know, as Mandy was talking about, some of the women who have issues with substances, substance misuse and so on. And yet still, we have a client now where they are being passed from pillar to post. And if I say so myself, it wasn't part of our intervention. Where they would be now would be absolutely horrendous. Language issues, just that's all I can do, just put my hands up. And it's quite interesting because a lot of the time, a lot of the workers, and somebody, Gail, you mentioned that women, women have a lot of the positions within housing. And for the language issue, the language barrier, again, it is horrendous that the housing people just basically, they just don't do their job. They're just, a lot of them are just lazy. They won't get an interpreter. They will not take time with the women. They push and rush and bully them, and of course the women kind of just go into themselves. They think they are being a nuisance for some of their rights. And I haven't even begun to talk about the domestic abuse, the domestic violence. Yeah. And as Mandy was talking about, the trauma that the women are going through. And this is consistent in all areas of housing. And as we say, can you believe that in 2020, for the African heritage community, we do not have a Black refuge anywhere? It is everybody else who we have to go to, and 99% of them do not have what we say an understanding of our needs, what we need, what we want, what we should have, etc., etc. They're all telling you what you can have, shouldn't have, what you need to have, and we do not have a refuge. And so sometimes at Sistah Space, because we don't mince our words, we say it straight, we have total and absolute respect for all the services run by women, but we sometimes have to say, you cannot tell our story, you cannot tell us what we need, how we need it, when we need it, etc. Even today, again, we've got a woman who is in temporary housing. Her situation again was dire. She's in temporary housing, and the housing people came and they asked her to disclose her domestic abuse and domestic violence business, simply because she would not take a place where her perpetrators, including her family, are not far from where housing wanted to give her a thing. And because we wasn't there, they felt the need. And who was the main perpetrator? A woman asking her. And she felt that she had to disclose her business. And so obviously when she left, she phoned, and she was just traumatized, brought back all the trauma and everything. And then it's not just about cultural language, it's just also about language that is used that left her really traumatized. And just a couple more things. Sorry, I did write a little. And again, just generally housing, you know, as we said, the percentage of we were talking about earlier on with women, you said it was 85% or something, 45% of lone mothers with dependents. Yeah. Trying to get housing. When it comes to the African Caribbean community, very hard to find statistics. What's the, you know, all them kind of things. I can't even, I'm trying to talk so fast. I'm trying to get statistics, trying to find information, trying to, you know, go to people so that we can be involved in it. When we come and we say, we know, are we able to work with you so that we can tell our story, we can be included in those stories and everything, and every step of the way is a no. So yes, it sounds, you know, what I've just spoken about sounds like all negative, but this is based on 4 women's experiences who we're dealing with at this precise moment. So yeah. I don't know if my time is up.
No, you're doing well. I actually, well, there's 2 things, or several things. One is that I'm surprised that nobody is actually asking questions, because it seems to me that you have raised loads of interesting questions, all of you. what I was going to suggest is, because I need to turn the light on because I can't actually see what I'm doing. So perhaps we'll just have a 1 minute break and everybody can just stretch or whatever. And then in the meantime, I want everybody there's still 44 of you here, so you must have things you want to know from, from our panelists. So just think of those questions that you're dying to ask, and we'll reconvene in 1 minute's time, okay? Okay, good. Actually, I'm going to just turn my video off for a second. Haha, but you can still hear me, can't you? Maybe I'll mute myself for a second. I swear a lot, so. I'll unmute myself and I'll put my video back on. Ah, there we are. I can see myself. I don't know whether you lot can see you, see me or each other. Okay, grand. Oh, look, a couple more people have put questions in. Excellent. Oh yes, now here's a question. I meant to say this at the beginning actually, about whether the recording is going to be released. Yes. What we'll be doing is in fact, Emma will be our queen of organising this, is we put, we're recording it now. We'll put the video up on, the link up on our Feminist Library, Demand Equality and what's that? So just hang on 1 minute, Lucia, I'll come to you in a second, okay? Yeah. Oh my God, I can't cope. I'm not very good at multitasking. Yes, so the video of today's webinar will be put up on the, okay, just hang on. I will come to you, Lucia, I promise you. I need to focus here for a second. Will be put up on the Feminist Library website. And the other thing I wanted to say about that is that we've already got the recordings up of the first 3 webinars. You can also find the link to them on our website, and also the resource list that came out as a result of those 3 previous webinars. And so that's where we'll be putting the resource list for anything that you post in the chat box. Okay, good. So that was just a general question. I hope I've answered that. Now let me come to the actual questions. Okay, I'll deal with that in a second. Okay, okay, right. Yes, I think this is, okay, I'll deal with these questions, and I think that Lucia was trying to raise something. Okay, could we put a link in the chat to the other webinars? Yeah, well, let's put up the Feminist Library. We've got a whole set of links to the Feminist Library. Oh, wait a minute, that's been put up already. Sorry, I think whoever just asked that, there's a link in the chat to the other webinars is up there. So basically, if you go to our website, to the Feminist Library website, then you should be able to find a link. I think it's under events. Okay, sorry. Okay, now let's deal with a concrete question actually, which before we come back to the more general questions, Junior B wants to know from Rose, has Sistah Space now lost the lease on their sheltered housing? So would you like to just say a little bit about your current situation, Rose?
Okay, yes. We were, just very briefly, we were in a one room, a single room shop front in Hackney, in Clapton, in an area that's really not safe. The space was never safe, but as you do, you just get on with it. We spoke to the council all the time. MPs, everybody, dignitaries, everybody has come to this space when we were there. They eventually, by default, they said that they would do it up. We went to a temporary space in Mare Street, opposite Hackney Town Hall, and obviously the COVID came. As soon as the government said people could go and visit their relatives, Hackney told us that we had to go back to the space, and we said, well, we can't because there's still a pandemic. As they called him, BAME, which we do not subscribe to, and Black people were at the highest risk of catching the COVID. So we're not going nowhere. Can we stay where we are until the pandemic is over? Because there were 5 phases to the pandemic, which actually stops this month. But in June, they said, like, you got to go back. We said, no, we're not going back. And we said, can we stay here? Etc. And Hackney, and then the mayor, Philip Glanville, just went in public on Twitter and started to put out all our business, and it has not stopped since then. So what's today? Today's Thursday. I think Monday or Tuesday, we received a phone call from Vice magazine, who did an article on us, to say that Hackney told them that they have sent us an eviction notice. Hackney has been putting out all our business in public simply because we kind of stated that they're not doing much for black organizations, and neither for domestic abuse, for African heritage domestic abuse victims and survivors. And he just went in public, and since that day, everything that Hackney's been doing, they've been putting it out in public to defend themselves. So the 2 things that Hackney keeps saying, I will answer your question, sorry, this is just, so the 2 things that Hackney keeps saying is, you can't stay where you are because you said you would go back to the one room space, and we have refurnished it, and we spent £35,000 on this refurnishment. And we keep saying to them, but we've always told you, and we have enough evidence to tell you that that space is not a safe space. And there's so many reasons. You can find that on all the articles, etc. Sorry, you're making too much noise. I'm on here. Real things here, yeah, grassroots. So on Monday they sent us and they emailed, well, they told Vice magazine first, who phoned us, and then they emailed us the reasons why. And the reasons why are consistently because we said we'd go back to Clapton. They spent £35,000, but although this space that we are in is a very safe space, our numbers have gone up significantly by about 300%. Women from the Windrush generation are coming, and they've been forgotten, and they haven't got a story in all this. Women from East Africa and, you know, other countries, because most of the time we hear about African Caribbean people and not the other people. And although to get into this space that we're in, you have to, there's a security at the door, there's a code for the lift, there's a swipe to get up the stairs. Nobody can get on your floor because you're the only one that's got the swipe, and then we've got the keys to the thing. The mayor and everybody else is saying to us that that space is not safe enough. We need to go back to the one-room place. You go back to the one-room place, you can only see maybe 2 women because social distancing and everything else. You just cannot carry out your work. So the answer is yes, Hackney has, and I must tell you, they have put everything about us on their Hackney website. They've emailed all their workers, and yesterday on their Instagram page, they've put a link saying something about Sistah Space eviction, and then when you press that button, there is the whole eviction thing on their Instagram page to tell everybody in the world that we have been given an eviction letter.
Okay, so I think the most pressing question then at this point is, what can we all do about this? I know that London Renters Union has helped with at least one demonstration, but
yes, they did. Yes.
Somebody commented lower down here, a question was saying, well, how does this all fit in with Black Lives Matter? This is an interesting question I would like to ask, and I'm a Hackney resident as well, and I believe we have more than 50% of our population is Black and other minorities. So, yeah.
Well, how does Black Lives? Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it just about 2 weeks ago? Hackney put out their Black Lives Matter manifesto, or whatever they want to call it. They read a whole thing about how important Black lives are, and Black Lives Matter this and all this kind of stuff that they put out. And at the same time that they've put out this Black Lives Matter manifesto, whatever they want to call it, they are being very disrespectful, and all them kind of words you can think of, to us. Never before has anything been done just because you have challenged somebody about your views, and it's been plastered everywhere, every day, all the time. This man behaves badly. So the Black Lives Matter thing is a farce for Hackney, and this is my personal opinion that I'm saying. It's an absolute farce, and you're attacking a domestic abuse charity, the only one of its kind that's strictly for African heritage women and girls, and this is what you're doing. So Black Lives matters to us, but not to Hackney. They will dispute it, but that's how it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just trying to think of the easiest way that people can keep up with you and support you. And I mean, I think we've already put your handle up, haven't we?
Yes.
Maybe.
Twitter and Instagram.
Yes.
Those, if you want to find out everything that's going on and what's happening, those are the 2 areas. Twitter and our Instagram. We've been very transparent all the way through. We always have been transparent, and so anything that happens, anybody we hear from, anything that's going on, you can follow what's going on via those medias.
Okay, good. So, and I think, is Emma posting the links at the moment? Okay, so if you can make sure.
Yeah, it's up there already, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think we should just go back to, I mean, thank you very much for that. I think it's important that everyone knows that it's an ongoing situation. There's a question here. Yes. I think, I mean, I just want to make sure that, Lucia, you know I'm not ignoring you, but I think the thing that you were trying to put up was to say, let's make sure that we talk about inclusion. Is that right? And I think hopefully we're covering all of that. And Yeah. So could I just, this was a question from somebody, from Hannah Weber. She said, a question to any and all of the speakers. Rose was speaking about language, but would any of you like to talk more about what you find to be the most significant barrier to accessing service? For example, is it a lack of trust for authorities? Is it the police? Is it healthcare workers? Is it something else? So would any of you like to answer that question? Lucia first, okay.
Well, look, we have to demand inclusion and equality in everything we do.
And I don't know, do you find any particular group more or less helpful when you're trying to deal with them?
Well, I raised this whole question of inclusion and equality within our housing association, and they set up a diversity and inclusion group, and then they set up different types of groups to look into discrimination, all the rest of it, going right through everybody's tenancy needs. And what they did was they set out to train all the managers in equality and inclusion. And so as that, I suppose it's trying to change people's mindset. You know, we know what we want, but if we don't have equality, we're not going to get anywhere. If we're not included in debates, we're not going to get anywhere, because you're constantly outside the door. So I think that really we have to keep demanding our rights within housing. And I'm starting to think that after all I've heard tonight, it might be time for tenants to have their own tenants conference or something, so that we can all get together and have a really good talk about our oppression inside housing associations. And those of us that's, you know, making little headways, and we could share information on how you can do that inside your own housing association. But at the end of the day, the whole thing is down to the CEO and what the board will allow and not allow. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so really speaking, within housing associations, they really need more Black and ethnic minorities and women on those, and LGBT people on those boards to advance that.
Yes.
If you keep people outside, then they're only working from their own narrative, aren't they?
Yes, yes. Okay, that's grand. I can't put this up on the chat box now, but maybe if somebody else in the Feminist Library can remind me to add it for the resource list. There is a very small, very struggling organisation that I'm part of that's based in London called Housing Association Residents Action. And we're very keen. I mean, we got kiboshed by COVID-19 and a whole bunch of other things. But I think yes, there is definitely a grassroots housing association residents organisation is long overdue. So we'll definitely, hopefully we can come back to that later. Okay, so Gazal had your hand up. You wanted to say something in answer to that question, didn't you?
Yes, so very quickly, I'd just like to draw the attention to, in London, and especially where I live in Newham, it is really about social housing and the lack of social housing. And that is a big barrier that it just seems to, it's not like there is no land, it's just that there is a lack of political will, and of course, the way people want to use houses as investment, and keep sitting on that. And there are many places that are houses that are vacant, and just, you know, the people are building profit. And of course, the institutional racism and the discrimination. So when you call upon the police to, even when a tenant calls upon the police to help with their rights, and that, you know, if a landlord is illegally evicting them, the police very subconsciously, or, you know, the way it's institutionally meant to be to protect the privileged classes, they end up protecting them and siding strongly with the landlords. So it runs across the board.
Yeah.
And just on the back of that, can I just quickly say about the police? Because I just thought, when I was talking before, if I start talking about the police, I will forget about talking about housing. The police themselves, they have not, a lot of the majority of them have not been helpful. There's a lot of sympathy and so on, but again, part of that is because there's not enough training. They haven't been trained, they haven't been spoken to about it, etc., etc. And again, people come in with the biases and the stereotypes because of the relationship that we as an African heritage community have with them. So it's like they bring all the stuff with them. The police one, again, some of the experiences we've had with them, again, it is horrendous. And this is why a lot of African heritage women and girls will not disclose, will not go for help, they will not want to engage with the system, because it's the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah. And that's me with the police.
Thank you. Okay, and I'd just like to move on to another question, because this relates to something that has been touched on a few times, about council homelessness policies. So Katie is saying that they can be really obstructive in providing security for survivors of domestic abuse. And it seems that a lot of this is linked to the lack of funding for social housing and policies that favour building a mix of affordable housing and luxury flats. So her question really is, what are your thoughts on how we can organise to change policy so that more social housing is built and more resources for survivors are available? Okay, so before I pass that back to the panel, I would just, again, as a housing association tenant, I would just like to say, yes, we must defend social housing, but we got an organisation, I'm a Peabody tenant, and we got a small group to try and activate ourselves to get Peabody to change itself. And you know what we need to understand, and I think this is true for all so-called housing associations, social landlords, a lot of them are building luxury housing, and that they claim that it's because they have to you know, make the money back in order to provide the social housing. And yet some of those big housing associations has got millions in reserve that they could easily build social housing. So I think I go back exactly to what I said to Lucia before, which is that we need to get grassroots, and she said we need to get grassroots housing association tenants and residents together. Anyway, sorry, I butted in there, but I just thought I feel very strongly about all of that. So, okay, panelists, what are your thoughts on how we can organise to change policy so that more social housing is built?
Is that question for anyone? Did you?
It's, yeah, for anyone.
I haven't got a clue.
Can you say that again, Gail?
Yeah. So the question is, I mean, actually, you know what, we could, sorry, I'm just going to stop and ask Emma a technical question here, right? Because we're down to 30 people here, which is lovely, but it's not 100. So is it possible to open this up to, I know we can't see people, but I think we can hear them, can't we, Emma, if we choose?
Yeah, I can change the settings so that the attendees can talk.
Yeah, but we do still need, somehow or other, we need to do it so that attendees, if you can keep yourself muted, because we can't see you at all, right? So if attendees want to speak, can you keep yourself muted, and then can you just say your name, unmute yourself and say your name, hopefully one at a time. We can experiment with that, can we? Okay, so, but before we do that, let's see if any of the other panelists, if Gazal or Lucia would like to say anything about how we can organise to get policy changed around social housing.
Mm-hmm. I think we should have some form of a tenants union. I really do, and and even I would. This is just off the top of my head now. You know, I'm beginning to think that I've always thought that women will change the world, and I still think that women will change the world. So I would say let's get an all-women tenants union going, because I think we're better speakers and we're better at everything. Because if we don't do that and we decide to have some sort of a tenants union, you know, it's going to fill up. I don't mean to insult men or anything like that, but they usually suck up the air in the room. And so I would prefer to have a women's tenants union, so that everyone will get equal say in there.
Good. Okay, thank you. Gazal, do you want to say anything in answer to that question?
I mean, I am a huge feminist and I'd love women to be everywhere, but I think we need men who are allies, and we would, I wouldn't say we need, but we'd welcome men who are allies, and we can train them, isn't it, to be more, because we can, yes. And so yeah, I think to the thing, how do we change policies? And I think it can seem very simplistic, but to that I would really say that people who are renting, and I think a lot of people who are renting and really going through the struggles are exhausted.
Yeah.
Are exhausted, and they are earning small wages and just trying to pull through and make ends meet. But I say that to myself, and I say that to my friends around, that even if you are tired, even if you feel despair, organize, meet people around, and join your local political group. Why not? Join it and make a difference, and get and persuade people, and vote vote in the right places, and introduce motions, do all of that. It can seem like, you know, oh, politics, which, I mean, a lot of my friends, I would say, are like that. And it's very difficult to convince them, but I just don't see another way, because at the end of the day, we need to get into mainstream power and make those decisions.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So good. Somebody else in the chat said, oh God, sorry, where are we? They made a good point. I agreed with it. About housing associations being the pits, really. They're just big businesses these days. I think grassroots tenants organisations, honestly, is the way forward. But I think what we're looking for is some way of keeping the women's agenda to the front. I mean, really, that is most important. And I think if we, you know, we need to meet as women sometimes in order to make sure that we don't get edged out, and that we keep pointing out the things that we already know, which is that women do the majority of the caring. Women are responsible for keeping the home together, and we can't do that if, you know, if we don't have the resources that we need, really. Okay. Yeah. Is there anybody else from the attendees who I can see all your? Oh, yes. Somebody was pointing out about you can put your hand up. Nana was the queen of this before, weren't you? But I've forgotten how to do that. So.
If attendees do want to ask a question, feel free to put your hand up. There's a comment right at the bottom of the chat by Leslie Mitchell. Leslie asks, something like the Glasgow Women's Housing Association, who were keen in 1915. In 1915, Glasgow rent strikes. Leslie, do you want to say a bit more about that?
Hi, sure I can. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm part of a group who researches women's history in Glasgow, particularly in Govan, where the Glasgow rent strikes really were fomented. And the Glasgow Women's Housing Association, which unfortunately we don't have any records for because they've been lost somewhere along the lines, was a non-party organisation started by people like Mary Barber and Agnes Dolan and Helen Crawford, and they came together and they brought together the women across the political spectrum and across to some degree across the class spectrum as well, but predominantly working class women, in order to protest the rent rises and in order to get the rent strikes underway, to protest the evictions that were going on at the time. And they were a housing association in very much the way that we want housing associations to be these days. But these are the conversations that we're having now about how can we make housing a better thing, and why are women not involved in just everything, like from the design of houses upwards, are exactly the same conversations that we found records of these women having 100+ years ago. So something very wrong has gone very wrong, and we definitely need to move forward and get involved where we can, be activist, get involved in politics, use our votes, and see what we can do to try and reverse this trend of housing associations being businesses and not run for the people who are actually in the housing.
Definitely. What you just said, Leslie, which is very interesting, reminds me of a couple of organisations. You might have heard of the co-housing movement.
Yeah.
And there's two specific co-housing organisations I know of, one of which is the Older Women's Co-housing, which is already set up and running. And another one that is trying to get off the ground is an Older Lesbians Co-housing organisation. Now, one of the problems up to now with the whole co-housing movement is that it has tended to be people who actually could afford to buy into it, into the co-housing. But because both of these organisations are feminist organisations, they have actually tried and are trying to organise it so that women renters can also join in. And I mean, the thing is, they're very small, an individual organisation, but you know, I think it is definitely true that, you know, we have lost a lot of ground, and we have to try and reclaim that for ourselves, and that those kind of initiatives are definitely one way forward. I know that older women's co-housing is constantly being asked by other groups, you know, for their help when they can't necessarily give it. And I mean, what it reminds me of is having been involved in women's liberation, you know, since the 70s, is that we always had this fantasy that we'll all live together, you know, when we're old feminists, and we'll support each other and everything. And unfortunately, the reality of the housing situation has just made that, you know, virtually impossible and very difficult.
Well, that's because it's become part of the system.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what's going on. Let's get it right. We're not just fighting individual housing associations. We're fighting a system.
That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Okay. Are we all on one screen now? I think we are. So would anybody else like to ask a question or say a question, say anything? You can just I believe Emma's unmuted you, allowed you to unmute yourself. So I don't see anybody unmuting themselves. Okay, let me just go back to the questions, because there were a couple that we didn't answer. Maybe we could just look at those.
Yeah, can I just say something about about the way that some of the women in here tonight have been treated? They can pick us off. They'll pick us all off one by one. But if we could start a women's housing movement, yeah, to advance housing in our favour, that might be an advantage. Because together we're always stronger. And what they do is the system always picks on people, like they've done with Rose, individually. If Rose had a big backing of a national women's organisation that was there to try and help the advance of housing for ourselves as tenants, and to support other tenants like Rose and people like her. And Gazal, is it? Did I say that right, Gazal? And yourself. You know what I'm saying? We're all isolated, and that's what the problem is.
Yeah.
We need a women's tenants movement, but like you're saying, you know, we have to do it with men as well. But we're only just shooting the breeze here. You know what I mean? Trying to look for answers. But I always think, who can I support? Do you know what I mean? Who can I support with the knowledge that I have about housing? You know, because a lot of us are sat here, and we all know the tricks of the trade. Yes. None of us are daft, and we're all clawing away, you know what I mean, as best we can, within we can. But how can we help somebody like Rose and Gazal? You need a movement for that.
Yeah. Yes, I think.
Because you're up against a big corporation, aren't you? The National Housing Federation.
Yes.
See, all this should be coming from them right down. We shouldn't be sat here all on our own, going on with ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They should have been on here and give us the answers to some of these questions and ask them what they're going to do about women in housing. What are they all going to do? There's a woman CEO right there sat at the top of that now, isn't there?
Is there?
And you see, if we had a good working group, we could be taking all our strains and stresses to them and say, now, what are you going to do about this? You know, there's Rose being treated like that. Gazelle's been treated the way she's been treated. Now, many more women are out there being treated like dirt.
Yes.
That's the question. How many more?
Yeah. No, I think you're completely right. So what we need is we need to relaunch the women's liberation movement, isn't it?
We need to relaunch something, because it can't go on like this, you know. It breaks your heart listening to Rose and Gazal. It's shocking what's happening to them.
Yeah.
And in my view, what's happened to Rose, that's a criminal offence to be blackguarding like that, you know.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It definitely is. And I hopefully, you know, one of the things that will come out of this evening is, as we say, some ongoing organisation. Okay, so I think we might be drawing to a close. What's in the yes, should be one national move to England says, don't get picked off. Totally not. That is right. So what did I want to say? Oh yes, I wanted to mention that in fact there is an organisation, a national organisation of, what is it called? Is it the Women's Housing Federation? Or you're part of it, Lucia, aren't you? I can't remember its exact name. There we are. Women's Housing Forum. Thank you. That's what I wanted. Now, this is a potentially a very good organisation. They organised a conference last year, and their theme was housing is a feminist issue. And they have a webinar that they're next Thursday, where there's an organisation, a mixed organisation called Homeless Link, but they have done work on specifically on women and homelessness. And so anybody who's interested, you can follow that link and you can find out more about the Women's Housing Forum and possibly attend that webinar. But I think the point that I would say about them is they're a very good platform to take off from, but they're predominantly women who already work in housing. So maybe what we ought to do is you know, become en masse, you know, get involved with them, because they've got at least a bit of the money and a bit of a structure. That could be a place that we could insert ourselves. I think Lucia, you're actually due to be on the panel of that next week, aren't you? So you can tell them what's for. So you're silent.
I would advise everybody to find out what their terms and conditions is. You know, what is it that they're trying to advance,
yes,
et cetera, et cetera. You know, anything about housing, I join it, because I'm still learning about housing. Because the only way we can snag it is to know everything about it. When we walk into meetings and we're only half-arsed and we know nothing, or a little bit, or we're really angry, because I've walked into meetings angry, but I've never known how to change it. So if you get to know the ins and outs of everything, then you can argue back and you can say things that they never even thought of. Do you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we are the ordinary people in the street. We're the tenants. Do you know what I mean? And we want a voice, and we would like to have that voice at the table. We should be sat at every table in housing.
Yeah.
We really should. That's the only way we'll bring about change. We should demand that CEOs knows everything about equality, inclusion, etc., and diversity.
right.
And
Every one of those housing associations should have that policy.
Yeah. And Rose, what were you?
And also, you know, like what we find, I mean, we're dealing with domestic abuse, but obviously when we go to all the different, be it housing, be it the police, be it the GP or everything, anytime you want to bring up with your culture or with race and prejudice and all that, you get shut down. It's like it's like they think that you're trying to disrupt everything. And so when groups come together, when women come together, everybody has to be transparent and everything has to be spoken about. And that is where mistakes just keep being made over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So inclusivity as well as everything else, this is incredibly important.
Mm.
Okay, I think we're almost at 9 o'clock, and it seems we've had a very good, you know, chat with each other. As I said, you know, we will, you know, we'll circulate resources, and the recording will go up on the website. So I would just like to say, well, I'd like to say one kind of personal thing, because I was trying to send a private message to Balu, but if it's Balu, who used to be part of the Feminist Library, could you hang on for a bit after, because I'd love to say hello to you. You don't have to say anything now in front of 25 people. If you're a different Balu, hello anyway. Okay, so I guess I'd like to just, you know, basically thank everybody, you know, thank our speakers, thank everybody who came. And just to let you know, we are going to be organising more webinars. We've got a good events team has now starting to plan the next couple. And we'd love it if you wanted to come back to the next one. And I think, is there anything else anybody else wants to say that I've missed apart from, well, we can all unmute ourselves and have a round of applause now, couldn't we? Yeah. Good. Okay.
And I would just like to take advantage of this 1 second that we've got left and say, together we're stronger.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you all very much. I do really appreciate everybody taking part, and I hope we can stay in touch, because I think we've got a lot of things to work together on.
Yes.
And we can use the webinars to support each other as well.
Yes, we can
Yes.
do further webinars.
Yes.
You know, if somebody has an idea or wants to, you know, the Feminist Library has got this resource, you know, of Zoom. And if anybody would like to, you know, talk to us about using the our Zoom meeting, you can approach us, you know, to see whether that's possible and we could accommodate that.